I want to go to the first guest on the show today, Sir John Redwood, Conservative MP for Wokingham. Mr Redwood, I beg your pardon, Sir John Redwood was one of 55 Conservative MPs who voted against the new tiers on December the 1st during the biggest rebellion of Boris Johnson's premiership. So clearly, Sir John feels pretty strongly about that, and I'm delighted to say he's with me now. Sir John, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining me. So, John, I mean, you guys in the Commons and your political careers are on the line when you decide to speak up and speak your mind, which, we often accuse politicians of not doing. Why did you decide to rebel against the imposition of tiers 3, 2 and 1, which I imagine you felt are unfair?
Yes, well, I felt very worried for some time about the damage some of the controls are doing to our hospitality industries, travel, tourism, leisure. These are all people's livelihoods on the line, businesses being wound up, people not being able to earn a living. So I want to do the minimum amount of damage whilst bearing down on the virus. And then I thought that the data wasn't being properly used. It seemed to me that the incidence of the disease was coming down in my own particular area. I had a lot of people saying to me, we were in tier 1. It now looks as if it's coming down a bit. And then we re-emerge in tier 2, which is so much more damaging.
Yeah, I know. It's pathetic, isn't it? Now, I live in Stockbroker Belt, Surrey, as I call it. So, John, you're in Wokingham, which is sort of right next door, isn't it? Right on the border there.
Yeah, we're next to Surrey, yep.
Absolutely. And I have to say that an English country pub in somewhere like Surrey or Berkshire, I cannot think of a safer environment anywhere in the world, honest to God. I go in there, there's perspex screens between the tables, there's a sign on the table which says your table has been cleaned. They leave wipes on the table so you can wipe the armchair if you want to that you're sitting in. You get up from the table, you put your mask on. I mean, they've just taken so much care to keep the places safe. I don't know if you're a pub user yourself particularly, but I am and have been all my life. In this industry, a lot of the work we do happens in pubs. So I'm absolutely bereft to have found out today that one local pub near to me has just closed its doors. No sign on it saying when it's going to reopen again, simply a sign saying, I'm sorry, we are now closed, and metal plates over the door and the windows. If this starts happening on a regular basis, we're going to lose one of the great characteristic industries in this country. That's the English pub.
Well, I agree. And before COVID-19, there was a problem for some pubs because habits were changing. People were eating and drinking more at home and with friends in a different environment. And so you did need to encourage people and to keep the pub as a local focus of entertainment and leisure. And this is making it so much more difficult. So, yes, I sympathise with you. I think it is very tough on pubs. I think a lot of landlords and tenants have gone to great lengths to try and make it as safe as possible. Nowhere is completely safe.
Yep.
It's about how much risk, but you can pick it up at home if somebody turns up or a delivery turns up or something.
Yeah.
You've just got to be very careful if you are particularly vulnerable.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Now, in rebelling with your 54 other colleagues, do you have any hope that because now we've got a vaccine which will be administered as early as early next week, and things are now moving apace, do you have some hopes that you will get the review you want of the tier system before the first officially agreed review on the 16th of December?
No, I don't think we'll get it before then, but I think what we did was we showed to the government that we represent millions of people around the country who are extremely worried by all this and think that the economic damage is too grave. And I think we've got the government rethinking. I mean, I rebelled the previous time against the curfew, which I thought was particularly damaging to hospitality and pubs.
Yeah.
And we did get some modification in that. The government started to weaken its position on the curfew. I think this time round they were surprised by the fact that 55 of us voted against and another 15, I think it was, abstained, not feeling they could vote for it. Yeah. They realise it's going to get progressively more difficult unless they've got really good evidence, very persuasive arguments. So I think we we've made it more likely the reviews will be more helpful. I think that's the best we can say.
Yeah.
And we want to keep on building our case and therefore our numbers.
Yes, no, I totally agree with that. What I don't quite understand, Sir John, and you will understand this better than me because you've actually been part of the legislative process, is do we get 4/5 days at Christmas when all bets are off and we can just all go out and do whatever we want in pubs, houses and everything else, and then we come back on the 27th and say, right, lockdown's back in. That's bound to cause a spike. That will just result in another lockdown. Lockdowns don't work.
Well, that's what we want to avoid, isn't it? It's not quite a free-for-all at Christmas. They're quite complicated rules, but I think the main idea of the relaxation at Christmas is to allow a wider family to assemble, but you have to check the detailed rules for yourself on travel and meeting under the same roof. But the Prime Minister is also wisely saying, don't go crazy. If you think you've got very vulnerable people in your household, it's not a good idea to invite more people in, even though they are family.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you think there's a risk of some members of your family having it, they should stay in their own domestic bubble and shouldn't come and join yours. So I'm one who believes that we should trust people more to make their own judgments. I hope people over Christmas will make sensible judgments because I don't suppose people really want to give this thing to their relatives.
Well, of course they don't. And I totally agree with you. I think that the government, instead of acting like the nanny state, should have handed much more responsibility back to the individual. I have to travel to get into work, have to go on public transport. I wear a mask. I carry a bottle of sanitizer. I don't touch railings unless I need to. I'm very careful about socially distancing myself on transport, at stations, trains and all that. And I think if more people just said, look, I'll take on the responsibility of looking after myself, I think we'd be much better off because this Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 nonsense means that 75% of the pubs in Tier 2 are not going to open again anyway because they can't do any business with this ridiculous rule of having to serve a meal. I mean, I don't know who dreamt that up, but it's clearly an inefficient process to keep the country happy.
Well, I think the idea behind that was they want spacing in a pub. So I think they were saying if you're going to sit down for a meal and the publican stroke restaurateur has made sure that they're properly distanced the seats, then that isn't as damaging as having lots of people hanging around the bar. I think that was the common sense behind it. But I think you're right that the more of these detailed rules you have, the more anomalies and injustices there are, and the more there's likely to be some people who think, I'm going to break this because I don't agree with it all. Now, they shouldn't do that, but it happens. So I do want to trust people more, and I want the government to be very open and share all that they know, because this is still a relatively new disease. The scientists are very good, but they're learning on the job because 6 months ago they hadn't got a clue about this thing. And they need to share as much evidence as possible with us in an accessible way, and we can then make our own judgments about who we meet and what spaces we go into and how we keep our hands clean and all the rest of it.
No, I totally agree. I just wonder whether the government think now they're on an upsurge of popularity because the scientists have finally found a vaccine and they're going to start administering that vaccine as early as next week. And I wonder if they, care a little less now for what the public thinks about their daft Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 rules because they're on a wave of popularity because of the vaccine.
Well, I do think some of the scientific advisors or the epidemiologists, rather than the medics, do take the view that they want to get through until the vaccine is very widely distributed. And that's always been their view. And I think now that they've got an early vaccine rollout, I think they probably do feel maybe we can persuade people now to put up with all these rules until next spring, by which time many more people may have been vaccinated. Whereas I think we've got to be a bit more discerning than that, because we don't want more bankruptcies, and we do want people to have some kind of a life.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I mean, the economy has been completely wrecked. The wrecking ball's been taken to the economy. But not only that, I'll be talking to some medical experts later in the show, Sir John, who will tell me that, for instance, people who have got potential oral cancer are not being detected because they haven't been going to their dentist, and the dentist is the first point of call for noticing these sort of things. There are all sorts of side effects of the lockdown and the clampdown, and I hope the review comes sooner rather than later. Just before you go, Sir John, can I just ask you, are you hopeful of a resolution on the Brexit deal? Looks like Mr Macron might have had other ideas.
Well, I've always thought no deal was a very good outcome.
Right.
I've always said only have a deal if it's better than no deal, and I haven't seen anything on offer from the French and Germans at the moment that is better than no deal.
Right, okay.
Now, I would be very firm with them. I hope the Prime Minister will say, now, look, we're not going to give away our fish. We're not going to let you make up all our laws for us. We're not going to accept your court. That is very clear. You can't be an independent country and do all those things.
Yeah.
We're very generously saying we want to be great friends with you, and we're going to offer you tariff-free access to our market.
Yeah.
Now, do you want it or don't you? Because it would be clearly better to have a free trade agreement. That's always been the UK position.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those occasions when I don't want to compromise. I think the UK position is more than reasonable. I think it's very generous in circumstances. Yeah, and I think particularly the French position is outrageous, and I hope we just keep saying no.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know what Mr Macron's up to. I think he wants to make himself a bit of a hero in France, and the trade position between France and us isn't that strong, so maybe he thinks he can take a chance. Sir John Redwood, thank you very much indeed. Conservative MP for Wokingham.